If you've ever been rejected from a role, and pretty much everyone has, you probably wanted to get some feedback to figure out what you could have done better. But a lot of times, recruiters refuse to provide any feedback. And so in this video, I'm going to go over the most common reasons for why recruiters reject candidates and what you can really do to improve your chances in the future. And just a little bit about myself, I've gotten offers from Amazon and Google. Here are the offer letters over here. And I've spoken to several recruiters across the tech industry, across big tech companies, but also startups to really figure out what recruiters are looking for. And so in this video, using an example resume, I'm going to break down the reasons that recruiters often use to reject candidates. And this is the type of stuff that nobody's talking about. I've watched hundreds of YouTube videos on this, and no one across YouTube is actually talking about the reasons that I'm about to go over in this video. So make the video full screen, pay close attention, and let's get into it. And one final thing, this is only relevant for software engineering and tech roles in the US. And so if you're based in another country, this advice is probably not relevant or applicable to you. This is only if you're actually based in the US. Thing number one about your resume that you need to make sure is 100% accurate is your work authorization at the top of the resume. And I know this sounds kind of obvious. Every job application you fill out actually asks you, do you require sponsorship for this role? They're checking about your work authorization. And the biggest mistake that I see candidates making across all the resumes I review, because I do review hundreds of resumes every month, the biggest mistake I'm seeing people make is not putting their work authorization at the top of the resume. It should be right there, especially if you're a US citizen. Go ahead and just put that on the top left of your resume and make it nice and clear for recruiters, because that is something that's going to help you land more interviews because the company doesn't have to worry about sponsoring you. And so if you're a US citizen, go ahead and just put that top left at the top of your resume. I know it seems like such a small thing, but it will help you land more interviews. And in terms of like actual rejection reasons, a lot of times recruiters assume that you need sponsorship even when you're a US citizen. So let's say you're watching this video right now, yes you, and let's say you're a US citizen. Well, a lot of times, if you don't actually have that written at the top of your resume, the recruiter might just assume that you're on a visa, that you're from another country, and that you recently moved to the US and therefore you need sponsorship. But the truth is, you don't. You're a US citizen. And so just make that nice and clear for recruiters. Put it at the top of your resume. I know it seems like such a small thing, but it will help you land more interviews. The next thing is the actual titles on your resume. And this one, honestly, is kind of ridiculous that this actually matters, but it does. So pay close attention. You'll see that this resume that I'm looking at right now, software engineer, software engineer, software engineer, all the titles are super consistent from top to bottom. That is absolutely crucial. I see people's resumes have titles like back-end developer and then full stack engineer and then systems engineer, and they've got all these different titles over their resume, and that's a huge mistake. You want to just change all of your titles to just say software engineer, right? It doesn't matter if the company you work for has given you a different title. That doesn't matter. Just change it to say software engineer, software engineer, software engineer. This will help you land more interviews. I've spoken to recruiters at various tech companies about this. And the reason for it is that in the eyes of a recruiter, they will view your resume as kind of scattered and all over the place if you have different titles for every role. I know that sounds silly because whether it's full stack, back end, front end, whatever, it's all under the umbrella of software engineering, right? But in the eyes of a recruiter, they don't really see it that way. They see it as, oh, this person's experience is scattered and disorganized, which I know, it makes literally no sense, but this is the type of reasoning that some recruiters in the industry are using. So just go ahead and just change all the titles on your resume to just say software engineer for every experience, and it looks so much more clean and cohesive. It makes you really have like a streamlined narrative with regards to your experience. And I know that sounds like corporate BS, but it actually matters. So I've mentored hundreds and hundreds of engineers over the past few years. One of the first changes I make to every single resume that I'm editing is I'll just change the titles to say software engineer. Sometimes people have it as software developer, back-end engineer, full stack, whatever. Sometimes just programmer. I'll just change everything to software engineer, and you will see people land more interviews when you make that change. It's absolutely crucial. The next thing has to do with the actual bullet points on your resume, right? The bread and butter of your resume is each of these bullet points that is actually describing your experiences. And this is one of the biggest things that recruiters are looking at these days to decide whether to reject candidates or actually pass them on to the next stage. And it has to do specifically with the metrics, improved accuracy by 20%, improved throughput by 30%, right? You've probably heard before that you're supposed to have metrics on your resume, right? And that's true, but there's actually a sweet spot to find. So most people are unfortunately in one of two camps. They're in one camp where they have no metrics on their resume, and that's not good because recruiters do want to see that stuff to see the actual impact of your work. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have people who have it in literally every single bullet point on their resume, and that's also a red flag to recruiters. They will reject you if they see metrics and percentages in every single bullet point on your resume. You need to find the sweet spot, which is having it in around 50% of the bullet points on your resume. The reason is, if you have it in every single bullet point on your resume, the recruiter thinks that your bullet points are just AI generated, that you use, ChatGPT or Claude to write your resume, and it's kind of a big turn off for recruiters. So go ahead and have some bullet points on your resume, like, for example, these two over here, where you can see there's no metrics or percentages in there. And that's actually intentional because it's almost a red flag to recruiters if you have it in too many bullet points. So you got to have it in some, but not all of them. And then the next thing that recruiters will often reject candidates for is the education section. And I know that sounds like it shouldn't really matter, like it's just the education section, but it's the location of the education section. It needs to be at the bottom of your resume. If you're watching this video, you have at least a couple years of experience, at least 1 to 2 years of experience, maybe more, and you're not like a university student, you're not fresh out of college, you've been in the workforce for at least a year or two. Therefore, your education section needs to be at the bottom of your resume. And if you have it at the top, recruiters are going to reject you because they're going to assume that you're a student or you're fresh out of school. And I know that sounds ridiculous as well because can't the recruiter just look at your work experience and see the number of years of experience you have? You would think so, but these recruiters only spend 5 to 10 seconds really skimming over each resume. They're looking for work authorization, they're looking for the actual titles for each of your experiences, and they're skimming for some metrics and percentages and quantitative impact on your bullet points. And then they're looking at the education section. And so recruiters are not going to take the time to really, put the pieces of the puzzle together, so to speak. You got to just put your education section at the bottom of your resume because if you have it at the top, it ultimately makes the recruiter perceive you as someone who's fresh out of college and is ultimately less experienced. And you don't want the recruiter to kind of bucket you with those people who are still in college or, fresh out of college because those guys barely have any experience. So you want to put the education section at the bottom of the resume. All right, that's it for this video. I know these tips seem like such small things that shouldn't really matter, but fixing all of these things on my resume is ultimately what got me interviews from Amazon and Google, and I was ultimately able to get offers from these companies as well. And if you're looking for another video to watch where I break down how to actually reach out to recruiters at top tech companies, there's going to be a video popping up on the screen now. YouTube will put it up here, and you can watch that one next, and I'll see you soon.